This cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete decoding of all 12 codes, the tablet numbers, the translated passages, the astronomical date they specify down to the degree, I put it all into a written document. It is linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now let's continue. The tablet that George Smith translated, K3375, is what scholars who have seen the leak notes describe as a departure registry. It was apparently kept by Sumerian scribes assigned to track the comings and goings of every non-human entity that interacted with Earth between roughly 4500 BC and 2000 BC. 12 entries, 12 species. And the registry uses a coded system to describe each one. The codes are numbered 1 through 12, and each code corresponds to a specific entity. Code 1 is described as the original visitors, the Anunnaki proper. The tablet says they came from a planet the Sumerians called Nibiru, which in their language meant the crossing. Modern translators have argued for over a century about what Nibiru actually was. Some say it was Mars, some say it was a hypothetical 12th planet. The tablet itself describes Nibiru not as a planet in our solar system, but as a vessel, a moving object, something that arrives, stays for a period, and then moves on. The Anunnaki, according to Code 1, arrived in 4534 BC and departed in 2024 BC. They were here for roughly 2,500 years. Code 2 is where the registry becomes strange. It describes a species the Sumerians called the Igigi. The Igigi are mentioned in many other tablets, usually as a kind of working class for the Anunnaki. Servants, laborers. But the registry describes them differently. It says the Igigi were not a separate species at all. It says the Igigi were modified humans, humans who had been altered to perform specific tasks. The registry uses a word that translates roughly to shaped or carved, humans who had been shaped. The arrival date for the Igigi is listed as 4512 BC, just 32 years after the Anunnaki arrived. The departure date is listed as the same date as the Anunnaki, 2024 BC. They left together. Code 3 is the first entry that is not human-related. It describes a species the Sumerians called the Apkallu. The Apkallu appear in art from this period as figures with the body of a man, the head of a fish or bird, and wings. Mainstream archaeology dismisses these as religious symbolism. The registry treats them as a literal species. It says the Apkallu arrived in 4180 BC, stayed for approximately 3 centuries, taught the Sumerians specific knowledge, and then left in 3850 BC. The knowledge they taught is described in detail: mathematics, astronomy, medicine. The tablet says the Apkallu were the actual teachers of human civilization. The Anunnaki ruled, the Apkallu taught. 2 separate species, 2 separate functions. Code 4 describes an entity the registry calls only the Watchers. This is the same word used in much later Hebrew texts to describe the fallen angels in the Book of Enoch. The Sumerian registry predates the Book of Enoch by approximately 3,000 years. The Watchers are described as a species that did not land. They observed from above. They did not interact directly with humans, but they were present throughout the entire period covered by the registry. Their arrival date is listed as before counting began. Their departure date is blank, not because they never left, but because the Sumerian scribes apparently did not know if they had left or not. The Watchers were uncertain. Code 5 is brief and clinical. It describes a species the registry calls the Medics. They arrived in 3600 BC, stayed for 42 years, and left. During their stay, they apparently performed what the registry describes as corrections on the human population. The word used can be translated as healing, repair, or modification. Mainstream archaeology has no explanation for Code 5. The Medics arrived, did something to humans for 42 years, and left. Code 6 is where the registry gets specific about technology. It describes a species the Sumerians called the Anzu. The Anzu are normally depicted in Sumerian art as massive bird-like creatures, but the registry describes them as pilots, operators of flying craft. The registry says the Anzu were not the craft themselves. They were the beings inside the craft. They are described as small, gray-skinned, with large heads and narrow shoulders, the first written description in human history of what we would today call a gray alien. The Anzu arrived in 3200 BC and departed in 2800 BC. Code 7 describes a species the registry calls the Sleepers. This entry is the strangest one in the first half of the registry. The Sleepers are described as a species that arrived in 3000 BC and never moved. They did not interact with humans. They did not communicate. They were placed in specific locations underground in what the registry describes as stone vessels. They were left there to sleep, and the registry notes that the Sleepers were not dead. They were waiting. The departure date for the Sleepers is listed as not yet. 3,000 years ago, the Sumerians wrote that the Sleepers had not yet departed, and by implication, they wrote that the Sleepers would eventually wake up. The locations of the stone vessels are partially preserved in the tablet. 6 locations are listed. 3 have been tentatively identified by researchers who cross-reference the Sumerian geographic descriptions with modern satellite imagery. 1 is in the Zagros Mountains, in what is now western Iran. 1 is beneath the Giza Plateau, in a section that has never been excavated, despite ground-penetrating radar showing significant subsurface anomalies. The 3rd is in the Himalayas, at a coordinate that corresponds to a military exclusion zone maintained jointly by India and China. The remaining 3 locations have not been identified, but the registry notes that the Sleepers were placed at the deepest accessible points on the planet at the time of their arrival. Wherever they are far below the surface. Code 8 describes a species the registry calls the Harvesters. This is where the tone of the registry shifts noticeably. The Harvesters arrived in 2900 BC. They stayed for 30 years. And the registry describes their purpose as collection. What they were collecting is not explicitly stated, but several other Sumerian tablets from this exact period describe a dramatic population decline, entire villages emptying, people walking off into the desert and never returning. The registry simply says the Harvesters arrived, collected, and left in 2870 BC. Code 9 is the entry that I personally find the most disturbing. It describes a species the registry calls the architects, but not architects in the sense of builders, architects in the sense of designers. The architects arrived in 2700 BC. They were here for 112 years, and the registry says their purpose was to redesign the human genetic structure to make humans suitable for long-term management. The registry uses a word that translates roughly to domestication. The architects came to domesticate the human species. They left in 2588 BC, and the registry notes that their work was successful. The population number provided alongside this entry is staggering. The architects calibrated their modifications based on a projected population of 9 billion. The Sumerians wrote, 4,700 years ago, that the architects had set their work to fully activate when the human population reached 9 billion. The current population of Earth is approximately 8.1 billion. Before we move on to the next code, stop for a second. What you just heard about Code 9 is the part that changes everything. But it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the original Sumerian notation, the population number, the trigger conditions. It is all in the document linked below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back, because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. QR code is on your screen. Code 10 is described as the merchants. This entry is short, but it has a specific detail that researchers have struggled to explain. The merchants arrived in 2500 BC. They came to trade. They wanted specific materials from Earth that they could not obtain from their own planet. The materials are listed. Gold is the primary one, specific isotopes of gold. The merchants needed it for what the registry describes as atmospheric repair. Their planet's atmosphere was failing. They were collecting gold to seed into their upper atmosphere as a kind of filter. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is a Sumerian scribe writing down a business transaction. Merchants came, they bought gold, they left, they departed in 2480 BC. But here is the detail that makes this entry strange. We now know in modern science that you can in fact repair a damaged atmosphere by introducing gold nanoparticles at high altitude. We figured this out in the 1990s. It is a real technique. It is called geoengineering. The Sumerians were describing a process in 2500 BC that human science would not understand for another 4,500 years. Code 11 describes a species the registry calls the messengers. The messengers are not extraterrestrials in the conventional sense. The registry describes them as travelers from a future Earth, time travelers. They arrived in 2300 BC, they stayed only briefly, they delivered a warning. The warning is partially preserved on the tablet, but the section is damaged. The portion that survives says that the messengers warned of an event that would happen on a specific date. The date is given in the form of an astronomical alignment. Specific stars, specific planets, specific positions in the sky. Modern astronomers who have analyzed the alignment described in the surviving fragment have placed it within a window of the next several decades. The messengers departed back to their own time in 2299 BC. They were here for 1 year. The nature of the warning itself has been the subject of considerable debate among the few researchers who have seen the leaked translation. The surviving text refers to it as the closing, not the ending, the closing, as if something that had been open was being shut. The messengers, according to the fragment, did not warn the Sumerians to prevent the event. They warned them to record it, to leave a marker, so that whoever inherited the planet next would know that humans had existed, that we had been here, that we had been aware, at least for a moment, of what was coming. And then there is Code 12. Code 12 has no name. The registry simply describes this entity as the one that remained. It has no arrival date because, according to the tablet, it has always been here. It predates the Anunnaki. It predates humanity. It was on Earth before there were humans on Earth. And it has no departure date because it has never left and will never leave. The registry describes Code 12 as the original inhabitant, the species that was here before anyone else, the species that allowed all the others to come and go, but never relinquished its own claim to the planet. It says that all 11 previous species, the Anunnaki, the Igigi, the Apkallu, the Watchers, the Medics, the Anzu, the Sleepers, the Harvesters, the Architects, the Merchants, the Messengers, all of them came to Earth with the permission of Code 12. They were guests. They were tenants. They could only stay for as long as Code 12 allowed them to stay. And when their time was up, they had to leave. Humans, according to the registry, are different. The registry says that humans were not invited. Humans were grown, cultivated, like a crop, by the architects, with the permission of Code 12. And the registry suggests, in its final passages, that Code 12 is watching to see what humans become, whether the experiment is successful, whether we are useful, or whether we need to be cleared away to make room for the next experiment. This is what George Smith translated in November of 1873. This is why he reportedly stripped naked and ran through the British Museum shouting. Because he had just translated a document that describes humanity in technical language as a domesticated species cultivated by visitors, living on a planet owned by something else, something ancient, something patient, something that has never left. The tablet itself has been examined exactly 7 times since 1873. Each examination has been conducted in private. Each examiner has signed non-disclosure agreements. Of the 7, 3 have died of unexpected causes within 12 months of their examination. 2 have publicly recanted their belief that the tablet is authentic. 1 has gone into hiding. The 7th is the current curator of the British Museum's Mesopotamian collection, who has never publicly commented on the tablet's contents, but who, according to his own staff, refuses to discuss it even in private. Mainstream archaeology has an explanation for all of this. The tablet is a forgery. It is a mistranslation. It is a religious text being misread as a historical record. The Sumerians did not literally believe in extraterrestrials. They were writing mythology, and modern researchers are imposing a science fiction framework on what is actually just ancient religious literature. This is the official position. This is what every accredited archaeologist will tell you. And it might be correct, but there are 3 problems with the official position. The first problem is that the Sumerians did not write religious literature this way. We have over 100,000 Sumerian tablets that have been translated, and the religious texts are clearly distinguishable from the administrative texts. Religious texts use specific language patterns, poetic structure, repeated invocations. The registry does not use any of these patterns. It reads exactly like an administrative document. It reads like a customs log. The second problem is the astronomical data. The registry includes specific dates, given in the form of star and planet alignments. Modern astronomers have plotted these alignments. The alignments are real. They occurred on the dates the registry claims they occurred. The Sumerians would have had to possess astronomical knowledge that exceeds what mainstream archaeology says they had access to. They would have had to track precession. They would have had to model planetary motion across thousands of years. They could not have done this if the dates were fictional. The dates check out. The third problem is Code 12. Because the registry is not the only Sumerian tablet that mentions an entity that has always been here. There are at least 40 other tablets scattered across different museums and private collections that reference an ancient inhabitant of Earth. The descriptions match. The entity that is described as woven into the planet, occupying many forms, ancient beyond comprehension. The same descriptions appear in Babylonian texts, in early Egyptian writings, in Vedic Sanskrit, in Mesoamerican codices. Every ancient civilization that left written records mentioned this entity, and they all described it the same way. So either every ancient civilization independently invented the same fictional entity, or there is something real that they were all writing about, something that was known, something that was understood to be present. If you believe the registry, then the answer to the question, is there intelligent life on Earth other than humans, is yes. And it has been here longer than we have. And it is watching. And the watchers, the sleepers, the messengers, all of the other entries in the registry, they came and went with the permission of this older inhabitant, because they recognized that this planet was not theirs to claim. We are, according to the Sumerians, living on borrowed ground, and the lease may be coming due. The final fragment of K3375, the section that has been most heavily damaged and is most contested in terms of its translation, contains a single sentence. The sentence is incomplete, but the surviving words have been translated as follows: "When the experiment ends, the one who remained will decide what comes next." The Sumerians wrote that 4,700 years ago, and then they wrote down 12 codes, 12 species, 12 histories of contact, and then they sealed it in a clay tablet, fired it in a kiln, and buried it in the ruins of a city that would not be excavated for thousands of years. They wanted us to find it. They wanted us to know. The question is what we are supposed to do with the information. Whether we are supposed to prepare somehow for what the messengers warned about. Whether we are supposed to find the sleepers before they wake up. Whether we are supposed to recognize, finally, that we are not the owners of this planet. We are tenants, and every tenant eventually receives notice. The Sumerians received theirs. They wrote it down. They left it for us. The notice has now been delivered twice. If you found this fascinating,